Before we begin, a message from the Golf Performance Center. Join us on January 30th for our virtual open house.
Good evening, Hub Nation. Welcome to the 5 Elements of Success Player Development Series. I'm Roger Nick, your host and founder of the Junior Golf Hub. Got a really exciting show for you this evening. We're going to be talking about speed development, where it comes from, how do you get it, and also what might be some of those obstacles out there for you. But anyway, we're going to be talking about that here shortly. Before we get started, let's make sure that you guys are being interactive. We want to hear from you. Send in those questions, comments, concerns to the YouTube chat, also 5 Elements at thegolfperformancecenter.com. We want to hear from you. Again, we want to help you guys achieve your greatness in the classroom, on the golf course, and in life, and we want to get better at delivering the message to you how to do that. So again, make sure you're being interactive here. Also, we want to make sure that, I take that back. We're not going to make sure. We got a pop quiz coming up for you. And then what that pop quiz is power equals blank plus blank.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one. I'm not good at math, but let me rephrase that. Power equals blank plus blank. So let's get those answers in. Later on in the show, we're going to be pulling out that name of the hat, that correct answer. You're going to be winning this great Cook FMT band. This is a great tool for you. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but I tell you, this thing is going to kick your butt out there, and it's very useful this time of year if you're talking about movement and speed and strength and power. So really helpful in that. So get those answers in and of that pop quiz question. Like I said, we'll be pulling the names out of the hat here later on in the show. But before we get to that, let me introduce our co-host, Tyler Campbell, Director of Performance here at the Golf Performance Center, and also live with us, but remote in satellite somewhere, Dennis Hillman, Director of Coaching here at the Golf Performance Center. So guys, welcome. We're looking forward to a great show this evening talking about power, something that we know is high topic out there in the golf world these days. So
absolutely.
Looking forward to that. But Tyler, talk about what happened last week.
Yeah, well, last week we took a week off, but on our last episode,
sorry about that.
Last episode, we covered off-season competition scheduling. We talked about the purpose of the events that you register here in the off-season, adjusting those expectations to give yourself an opportunity to take what you're working on in your mechanics and in your golf swing to a level of competition in the off-season, and just managing those expectations during that time. And then also our off-season focus in the gym and how we don't need to go, veering off from our game plan that we set back in the fall. We made those decisions for a reason, and this is an opportunity to work on really getting stronger and developing power and speed like we're going to be talking about today.
Well, that's probably a good segue back to me, right? So again, this week we're talking speed development. The first question here is how to develop speed, right? How are we developing that speed? And I know, Dennis, I'm going to actually turn it over to you first and foremost, working in the off-season with the players and what you're doing and helping them develop that speed. So what are you doing? How are you doing it?
Yeah, it's a great time of year. We take advantage of the off-season up here with our juniors and really make sure they're training hard in the gym. And Tyler's going to talk about that. We know that, speed is really important in the game right now. There's a lot of talk about it with Bryson, bombing drives out there. And we know that the number one way to do that is to train athletically to be able to, produce that kind of power. But we also want to make sure you can control it and not get hurt. So we look at the efficiency of the movement, starting with a good assessment at the beginning of the off season and making sure we understand any inefficiencies in the way our juniors are moving, compensatory movements. So we come up with a plan to, kind of systematically progress through the right kinds of drills to create more efficient movement so that when they can create more speed athletically, they can control it and not get hurt.
Yeah, that's really good, and that's great to hear. I love it when we talk about that, baselining, if you will,
Sure.
and going through a screening process and understanding where you are, and obviously measuring that. And then Tyler, we talk about the Coach Guide or PDI
Sure.
assessment, and that's where we start with every athlete. And then once you understand where they are in their development pathway, you come up and create plans of, again, how now we're going to work with that individual athlete and how we're going to develop that speed. So,
Yep.
so why don't you talk to the audience about what we're doing there?
Yeah, one thing that you've heard us talk about week in and week out is how important it is to have proper function, moving well, having a good solid athletic foundation built first and foremost. One thing that we do, as Dennis mentioned, to assess our athletes heading into the offseason is to track their rate of growth. So every 6 weeks, we run them through a functional movement screen. We take their height and weight, and it allows us to really determine whether or not the athlete is approaching a growth spurt or going through a growth spurt. We know there are opportunities or windows of opportunity, if you will, to train the athletes, the junior athletes, to really, soak up that speed. If an athlete's going through a growth spurt, their body awareness, their proprioception is going to be hindered, if you will. So we really want to make sure that we take advantage. We kind of, again, lower the expectations on understanding a new movement pattern, but rather let's put pedal to the metal, with no pun intended, with regards to getting them as fast as possible. And really that nervous system, it's a good time for the nervous system to take that information in, and it'll stick with them, years down the road, if you're able to take advantage of those windows of opportunity.
Yeah, and that's really a good place to start, because what you're really saying is the nervous system and how it actually sends out the signals to the muscles moving the body really is an integral part of this, right? So it starts
100%.
with that intention. So it's kind of like those nerve endings are moving through the jungle and creating, kind of the better path, if you will, to get the best signal to get out of the jungle and get the most out of that, right? I mean, that's
absolutely. Well, if you look at, the muscular system is what's going to actually move our skeleton. The brain is what sends the signal to the muscular system to move. So, the better that signal's being sent through things like the myelin sheath, as Dennis can elaborate on with ingraining new movements on the golf side, the faster we can get that signal sent to those muscles, well, that's step one in creating speed for sure.
Yeah. And Dennis, I think that's really important to talk about, right? So you just talked about going through the motions of developing, consistent movement patterns or, through the golf swing. So what does that really mean? Tyler just mentioned myelin. I think that's really important. But talk to us about that on the golf side of things. How do you create that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of ironically in a way, I mean, as much as we're training for speed, in the gym and athletically, we actually slowed the athlete down on the golf side to ingrain new motor patterns. Myelin is the sheath that really enwraps your central nervous system, and kind of the term muscle memory has become something that people realize is not, the memory is not in your muscles. It's really kind of enwrapped in the myelin, and you can develop that myelin. So there's been a lot of science written about this, and I know very little about it, but we've read a lot about it and understand how it applies to how do you create a new motor pattern. So we slow the athlete down for quite a while, try to spend a lot of time in deep practice doing slow motion swings, and then slowly adding speed, say 20%, 40%. And then hopefully when we get to full speed, with the training in the gym and the more efficient movement, you've got a really, really good combination of being able to hit the ball hard and control it.
Yeah. And one of those things that you do, and obviously having been a part of this at some points, is understanding that as you're going through those slow motion swings and as you're increasing speeds, you're really also are challenging them in different ways, whether it's unstable surfaces, you're giving them different challenges, if you will, to make sure that movement's ingrained and getting ready to take it to the next speed and levels, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to progress through some challenges from stable to unstable. There's got to be some variability to the practice. It's not just take a 7-iron on a stable surface and do that forever. There's a time and a place for that, but we definitely won't stay there too long. Let's do it with a driver. Let's do it on something unstable, uneven lies. So there has to be variability to the practice to really learn the skill properly.
Yeah, and that's really good. And with that being said, you're talking about how, and obviously the muscles have to be firing, sure, but also the quality of the mobility has to be there as well, right? So if you're finding that there's mobility issues when you're going through the screening process, what do you do there when we're talking about how this happens? Right?
Sure. Well, again, I mentioned the functional movement screen earlier. If we're struggling with adequate mobility or stability, first and foremost, again, those are the foundation before we want to add strength and power. If you're struggling with those areas, it's important that we get those to a certain standard before we build too powerful of an engine. It's just going to lead to compensation and injury in the long run. So we really like to see all of our athletes at a 14 or above on the FMS, just to kind of give us a good, solid base like we were talking about. And then it's ready, then it's go time at that point. We can start to push the athlete, again, all while keeping an eye on that overall function, mobility, stability.
Yeah, and it leads to this foundation stuff,
sure,
right? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have a good foundation you're going to build a solid house on, right? So
yep,
that's what we're talking about here, is building that foundation so you can add the speed. Again, as we talk about cars, we've talked about the cars analogy for a long time. A lot of times you can have a car, you can have a Maserati, but if you don't have, you have a Maserati body, but you don't have the engine, it really is not going to go very fast. And if you don't have the brakes, you can't stop it if you have the engine. So all of these things are, intermingled, if you will,
sure,
are the ingredients of this.
Well, when you look at developing power in the golf swing and becoming a powerful golfer, we really want to look at two areas: strength and speed equal power. All right, so I'll say it one more time: strength plus speed equals power.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like that sounds like a math.
Adds up, right?
Yeah, that's a math problem that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
There. But nonetheless, so we talk about maximal strength and increasing muscle mass. Again, back to Bryson, you've seen the transformation that his body's gone through to actually increase his mass, the size or the number of muscle fibers that he has to recruit. And then we just talked a few minutes ago about the signal that the brain needs to send to those muscles, and really getting them to contract quickly or rapidly. Mm-hmm. And that's where the speed component comes in. So, that combination is really what's going to ultimately result in a very powerful golf athlete. Now, there's a few ways that we train speed in the gym here at GPC. Right. Starting off with, you got to have the right intention, right? So we want to train fast. If you come into the gym and you're bringing 50, 60% effort, it's just not going to have the same effect. We adjust the volume or the number of reps this time of year to take that into consideration so that maximal effort can really be brought to the particular exercise that you're doing. But we're doing everything from sprint variations, jump variations, both linearly, rotationally. We're throwing objects to work on sequencing. We're slamming med balls, again, both down at the ground, throwing them up in the air. We're rotating, throwing them into the wall, all in an effort to get that brain talking to the body, moving these muscles quickly. Some tools that we'll use too: Olympic lifting. We introduced Olympic lifting to our junior athletes at an early age. We really need to make sure, again, that they have a good, solid foundation first and foremost, so that they don't sacrifice technique. I encourage you to find a coach who is well versed in Olympic lifts. If you're curious about this, don't necessarily go about it on your own without a professional eye at first, because there are subtle nuances that can lead you down the wrong road. But there are some great benefits to Olympic lifting. Neurologically, it's extremely athletic, right? It requires proper sequencing, good coordination, speed, mm-hmm. all things that we want to look for in a golf swing, right?
Right.
So, I think incorporating it at the right times in your development is very important. And again, building that foundation from a young age. We've got 10-year-olds with dowels who are working on, ingraining those movement patterns in the gym to be ready for when their skeleton and their developmentally, appropriate time to start to load those movements. I think it's a great tool. The last thing I'll mention is overspeed training. So, really taking that nervous system to a new level. We want to allow the body to experience what it's like to swing the implement more in our world of the golf movement.
Right, yeah.
Faster than we're used to doing it in competition. So we're not really worried about the result necessarily. We're just trying to get that body to feel what it's like to move that club faster than you might do it if something was on the line. And as Dennis mentioned earlier in the episode, it's important to incorporate this with a well-rounded strength and conditioning program, right? Where we're still continuing to focus on our overall function, but giving ourselves an opportunity to get fast.
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to.
I'm going to take it back to just a second there. You're talking about overspeed training and, moving the instrument very fast.
Sure.
baseball world, you have the donuts, and obviously golf world adopted that as well with some training aids out there. Fans, Momentous, and the swing donuts, those kind of things, probably have their place. But if you're looking to add speed, it's probably not the place, because that really is training the neurological system to move slower and recruit more muscle to support it versus actually move it faster.
Totally, yeah, I would agree. We rely a lot on the super speed training system here. They've done the research. They've packaged this system in appropriately weighted clubs for all stages, whether you're new to the game and you're a young junior, pee-wee, if you will, to our all-star level, the high school age junior athlete to this adult senior athlete as well. So, these clubs are weighted appropriately relative to a standard driver. And, ultimately the heaviest club is even just a little bit heavier than the driver. But the first two clubs of the set are going to be lighter than the implement that you're playing with. And the reason being is that we really want to be focused on moving that faster than we would be out on the golf course.
Yeah. And Dennis, I think that's probably a good spot to turn it over back to you on the golf side. Is it, training speed and going out and getting guys to hit it faster or hit it further, it's going to require some crashes, right? Meaning we might hit some shots out of bounds. Our dispersion might be a little off, but so how do you actually handle that on the golf side, or how should the audience handle, maybe they're struggling with keeping it in play, but their speed's up?
Yeah, for sure. If you're adding speed, we know that even just in terms of degrees, the ball's going to go farther offline, even if you deliver it more or less the same way, just because it's going further. But aside from that, it's, they're learning to, a lot of times they're training and adding speed during these growth windows. So that in and of itself, there'll be some coordination loss maybe. So there's a lot of physical changes going on. There's more club head speed. So we have to mentally just, again, look at it from a long-term perspective, a growth mindset, and say, okay, I'm going through this phase right now that's going to pay off down the road. I mean, look at Bryson. That's basically what he's done and continues to do, experimenting with a 48-inch driver and, just seeing where he can take it. But he knows that it's not going to be a linear progression. There are going to be phases that you maybe take a step back before you take two steps forward.
Yeah, and we don't want to give Bryson all the credit. Like, he's not the only one out there, right? I mean, we see so many other players who, obviously Roy McIlroy and some other players, obviously Tiger. Greg Norman was working on this many years ago, and you see so many players working on getting better and trying to add speed as their careers progress. But going back to the younger player, one of the things we struggle with, is, okay, where speed comes from, right? And what do we need to do? But then there's some of the other side, as you talked about, is is there a potential to add dysfunction to function if we do this in the wrong order, right? I mean, if we maybe have some movement issues or firing sequencing issues, but yet we're adding some of these techniques that you hear out there of speed training. Could that be detrimental?
I mean, Dennis, you can speak to it maybe more on the golf side with regards to the mechanics and tendencies that you'll see, but I would say physically, yes. I mean, you're looking at, if you don't set yourself up for moving well early on, or even just continuing to work it again as your career progresses, compensation is going to creep in for sure, and you try to create speed however you can, basically, is how, and it might not be as efficient or safe as it could be if your movement were to improve, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just kind of two different paths. Do I want to build a foundation for speed in the future, or do I want to get that speed right now? So a lot of bad decisions will happen, or kind of instinctive things. Like Tyler said, you might just compensate to create speed. You might have the wrong equipment. You might be playing with drivers that are too long for you when you're young, just because you're trying to keep up tomorrow, versus let me lay the foundation. Number one function, power and speed, quality of movement. Over time, that's going to pay off. We keep hearing it from the best in the game. Kyle Berkshire had light clubs when he was younger. So it's really just long-term versus short-term perspective, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so we talk about where speed comes from. And we see this, again, Dennis, back on the golf side. We see this with young players. Again, maybe the parents out there are really talking about how I can get my kid to hit it further. They go with longer drivers or longer clubs, and you know, maybe there's some immediate gains, but they're kind of in a short-sighted way losing yardage later on because they're only moving that so fast.
Right.
So that hinders their overall development. So I think that's one of the things, you know, it would be really good to kind of talk about where speed comes from.
Sure.
And why that's so important.
Well, with juniors in particular, we're seeing a lot of juniors developing power and speed vertically. So we talk about ground reaction force. You know, there's various ways that we lean towards generating those, right? And a lot of it has to do with how we move, right? So, you know, whether it's vertically, horizontally, rotationally, you know, those are kind of the three main areas that we generate force or use the ground. What we find with juniors is they're instinctively going to lean towards more vertical force. Again, that could be driven by the equipment that they have, or it could just be one of the first ways that they've learned to generate power. Kids just jumping around, being little kids, right? So, you know, I think we look at swing cat and some of the data there. Those are the three main areas that we typically will generate power. In terms of speed in particular, though, and Dennis, you might be able to elaborate on this here in a few, is, you know, hands and wrists are another great way to generate speed. I was working with an adult member of ours a few months back, and with the super speed clubs, and we had the radar on the ground, and I just encouraged him to experiment a little bit. And I said, you know, okay, you know, think about different ways that you can generate speed. Try a little bit of a jump at impact. See if that changes the number. You know, try to humor me here. Try to flip your wrists and get those hands to turn over quicker at impact. See what it does to the number. You know, and try to rotate faster or sequence more properly and see what it does to the number. And you know, again, these are different ways to generate speed in the golf swing. But I'm not going to say you should do all three. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm just saying these are you know, these are ways to improve club head speed, essentially. Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, Dennis?
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, I think, you know, where does speed come from is a really good question. I would say, you know, we believe number one, it comes from how you leverage the ground. So, you know, you have to create power rotationally, certainly in any sport. You have to leverage the ground, and then you're trying to transfer energy through your body with good sequence. So, you know, understanding function, how you create power and speed, different segments is all relevant. But we're doing a lot of research on how juniors leverage the ground, and we definitely see a lot of vertical movement, like Tyler said, which ultimately can impede your ability to create maximum speeds and deliver the club with the path and face that I think we'll be talking about here in the near future. But so you're using the ground is key, and yeah, we're just trying to do more research and really understand it better.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we do obviously struggle with is understanding. You know, as kids are going through their growth development, they're going to struggle with, you know, just stability. They're going to struggle with mobility, and
Sure.
you know, again, they're just trying the path of least resistance to get
Right.
the power they need to move the equipment. So I think there's some leeway here. It's not again, we're not saying there's a wrong thing here, but understanding there are foundational things from an athletic standpoint, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time. Which is, you know, the better the athlete, the easier it is to acquire skill. And I think talk about, you know, working in different planes, you know, and working in the transverse plane, you know, that's really just truly good athleticism.
Sure.
And doing that creates more torque in the ground, which obviously maybe give us more rotational velocities.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but playing other sports as a kid is tremendously helpful. For your golf development, if that's the sport that you ultimately choose to you know, pursue. But for that reason exactly, you know, you're not necessarily thinking of it as consciously when you're playing hockey or when you're playing soccer or football or whatever it might be, tennis. But those things are happening, right? You're using the ground to change direction. Your brain is sending the signal to those muscles to go sprint after the ball in open space or whatever it might be. So you know, there's all that stuff is happening again as you're playing these other sports. You know, if golf is your passion and you choose to do it, we're just trying to now, you know, cultivate that all into our motion in the golf swing.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. I mean, years ago I used to work with a lot of hockey players, and I found it very interesting to watch how they're leveraging against ice. They're on ice skates. You know, what is that? 1/8 of an inch of blade, and they're on this slick surface. But yet they're able to move that stick and hit the puck at 90+ miles an hour into the net. It's pretty fascinating. I don't see too many of their feet coming off the ground. Right? I
No.
mean, but yet in golf, we see that. And that's one of the things that perplexes us and why we're actually doing so much of this research on junior players and players in general. So there's got to be some type of correlation to that ground forces, that rotational. And again, hockey players, that turn into golfers, hit it a long way. You don't see them jumping off the ground typically when they're hitting the golf ball. It's just, they just have that ability to push against the ground and have some serious speed.
No doubt. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see. We've had some guys come through who can really hit it a long way.
So it is definitely something there that I'm so excited about, that we're working, with Dr. Lynn and Scott Lynn with Swing Catalyst and how we're actually going to, prove out some of these theories that we're talking about when it comes to that, and hopefully get some better education out there to you and the audience and who is listening. And I know Dennis and we've had these discussions all the time. I mean, just being able to understand it better, and again, from the long-term perspective, how much short-term goals get in the way. So some of those obstacles that we have out there, and I think that's something we need to talk about. What are the obstacles here when it comes to developing speed?
In the gym, it's certainly intention and just perception of what a maximal effort really entails. I think it's fun when the junior athlete sort of, the light bulb goes and says, "Wait, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could box jump that high, right? Or I didn't think I could broad jump that far. I didn't think I could. My 20-yard sprint wasn't, bam." So or power clean. The cool thing, we've coached the hang clean here, and when we're getting 8th graders, freshmen in high school who are demonstrating good solid movement and execute the power clean with grace, that's music to my ears, and that's what makes the job fun. But those things are great for the athlete, and I think the obstacle, in my opinion, for them is allowing themselves to fail and really just understanding the intensity that it's going to take to get faster.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's give that a kind of a warning, warning, So, idea there is that obviously all these athletes that we have here that Tyler's talking about, they're going through screenings. They're making sure that their proper function is there before we're putting them through this strenuous type of loads, if you will. So if you're out there and you're looking to do this, and obviously, these episodes are on YouTube and you can go back and look at this, but just make sure that before you get in the gym and start actually performing some of these activities, that you've gotten properly screened. I would say the FMS is, by far the baseline screen for everyone out there as an athlete. That'll help you understand where you are functionality-wise, movement and neurological connectivity. And I think that's a good place to start. And I think, Dennis, on the golf side, we've got to, there's some things there too that we have to, understand. There's going to be obstacles there for some of these players.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought of 3. I mean, and none of them are really obstacles you can't get around. I mean, one for me hits close to home. It's just your size. I mean, physical size, right? So, I think a lot of juniors look at it that way. Well, I'm not as big, or I don't have as much muscle mass, or I don't have the height. But we know, you talked about seeing Ian Woosnam in his prime hit the golf ball. He's 5'4", and he could crush it. And in fact, he hit it way past Nick Faldo, who was a foot taller. So we can't really say that that's definitely an absolute obstacle that you can't train around. 2 is just where you are athletically. I think a lot of what hopefully juniors take from this is you've got to train as an athlete. That really is the foundation of being able to create club head speed. And that equipment we alluded to, you got to have properly fit equipment all the way through your journey. And Tyler hit a great 4th one. Just mentally, you have to have a growth mindset that I'm going to go out and let it rip. And there's a mental aspect of being willing to let go that I think is really important.
Yeah, and that's hard to do because, again, we're talking about a lot of these juniors out there, a lot of you out there, I should say. You're worried about your golf score way too early. You're worried about whether I'm going to hit it out of bounds, maybe your stats. You got to throw those out the window. At the end of the day, you're really trying to look at the future, what's going to happen out there, maybe 5-6 years down the road. So just making sure that you understand it's not about the now, it's about where do you want to be. And I think that's really important. But on the physical side, what would be a takeaway, from an obstacle? What would you say would be the biggest thing they need to understand?
I think we talk about strength plus speed equals power. We know the programming that's involved with building strength and getting stronger. That's an important aspect of becoming a good, solid athlete. And then neurologically, getting the brain to send those signals and create speed. So being the fastest athlete that you can be through the various types of training that we were talking about today. I would say, thinking outside the box with regards to how to generate that speed. It's not just simply swinging the club faster. That's one component. But I would say, I encourage you to have fun. Do some jumps, sprint, rotate, all of it. Throw some med balls, get that anger out.
Yeah, absolutely. And always, as we talk about here, function dictates form. Again,
Sure.
It starts right there. It has to make sure that functionality is there before you create bad form or maybe create compensatory movements that could lead to long-term or maybe overuse injuries or chronic injuries, that kind of thing.
We don't want that.
Soreness. We don't want that,
no.
right? Really, really important out there. And I'd like to encourage also, if you haven't seen January's issue of the Golf Digest, our very own Tyler Campbell has a great spread. He's the centerfold there, so it's great exercises there to kind of help you guys again get better, get stronger, move better. So Tyler, you know what? That was an awesome job.
Appreciate you guys.
So really great to see that and what he did. So yeah,
Thanks,
we
Dennis.
give the claps. Thanks, Dennis. Dennis, you're next. So really looking forward to getting that golf spread out there. So again, check that out in January's issue. It's online. It will be on the newsstand, I think, today, right?
Yeah,
or
within the next few days. Yep.
Yeah, so check that out. So really, really proud of what Tyler has done here and move this and move function dictates form ahead.
Forward. There you go.
Forward,
that's
right?
it.
So that's really, really important to us. So really, really cool there. Michael, we have any questions?
We have one question. What if I'm worrying about my swing form changing by making speed a priority?
Wow, that's
Good
a great question. Dennis.
Yeah. Again, I think long-term perspective, you want to have your swing evolve and improve over time. And it's not going to be a linear progression. You're going to hit some obstacles or setbacks. But if you know that speed is important, you've got to train for it and do that slow motion work. And if you're executing on a good plan consistently, it'll come together in time. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it'll come together.
Come together. Go ahead.
Well, I would just second that and just say, when you're young, swing fast. Don't worry about the dispersion as much at a young age. We want to take advantage of those speed windows as best we can. So swing that club as hard as possible.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah. Any other questions? That's it. And I think, Dennis, you alluded to this earlier, and it's a question we hear all the time. Again, size. Does size matter? Stature. Again, we see it all the time. I think, Roy McIlroy to Ian Woosnam to Dennis Hillman, you guys hit it all 300 yards. So I don't think that's really a big issue. So a lot of you out there who may be concerned about that, give it time. You'll hit your growth spurts. Do the right things early. Make that progression, work for you. And that compounding efforts are going to pay off in the long run. So just make sure, don't try to microwave it early. So stay patient there.
Pop quiz winner.
Quiz winner this week is Matt Jackson.
Matt Jackson. All right, Matt
Love
Jackson.
it.
Thanks for tuning in, Matt Jackson. And the answer to that pop quiz question was power equals
strength plus speed.
Strength plus speed. And Tyler, you did a great job of giving those what do you call it?
Those hints.
Yeah, did the hints there. So that was really good. So
There you
again,
go.
thanks for tuning in. Matt Jackson will be sending this band down to you probably in Florida. I think that's where you are. So again, thanks for tuning in and giving that answer. In closure, we want to say thank you to our sponsors, Junior Golf Hub. Again, make sure you're downloading that app. Get those coaches in your pockets. Find that right fit for you that's out there. And make sure you get started with your self-assessment, your PDI self-assessment there. Look for the schedule for the coach-guided PDI out there as well. And if you're really interested and you want to know where you are in this development path, call us here at the Golf Performance Center and get your full PDI assessment done. And you will absolutely be on the right path after that because we're going to give you all the answers you're looking for. Also, I want to thank Ethan Allen Preparatory, keeping the greatness in the classroom. on the golf course and in life. And as always, make sure you're getting after it and enjoy the journey.